Hello, Your Honor.
Hello.
This is a case of Moffett versus Johnson.
Thank you, Jerome. Good day, everyone. Good day. Ms. Moffett, you always believed the defendant was your dad until 2 years ago when you received a message from a man claiming to be your biological father. You are tired of the confusion and are petitioning the court for a paternity test to prove the defendant is your dad. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson, you say the plaintiff's mother played games and unfortunately have substantial reason to doubt paternity. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Moffett, you received a message from another man?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell that story.
2 years ago, he inboxed me on Facebook, was saying that I'm his child, and when I'm looking like, wow, this confusing, like, I don't know. And then he had sent me a picture of me when I was like, maybe like 2 or 3. And he was saying that I'm his child and I have 2 other siblings.
I can see you're still shocked.
Yeah.
And so you submitted that message to the court. The message reads, "Hi, this is Lawrence Saunders. Call me because you is my daughter and I've been looking for you." You respond, "What? Who are you?"
Right.
"You aren't my dad." And he responds, "I am your dad and I can prove it. Call, please." Really?
Mm-hmm.
Did you call?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said that it hurt for you to say that come out your mouth, but I'm just like, you told me, and I want to find out, you are my father. But after that, then he just,
I know this hurts to think about and talk about.
it's just, I just want to know who my father, that's all. I really do.
And you were always told Mr. Johnson was your father.
Yes.
And this phone call out the blue, this message.
Yeah, just like, where'd it come from? Like, all of a sudden, out of 2 or 3 years.
Mr. Johnson, tell me why you have doubts.
Me and 2 more other guys was, at the time was dealing with Miss Moffett, and I just had doubts that I was her biological father at the time when she was little. I didn't know. I really didn't. I didn't know if I was the father or not, so here we are.
Miss Moffett, what was the nature of your relationship with Mr. Johnson?
Well, Mr. Johnson and I met when I was young. We fell in love, and we just was seeing each other, going places. He showed me things that I never saw before, and that made me fall for him, even though I knew he was married at the time.
Oh.
Yeah, he was married, so it was a lot of sneaking around, hiding. And we used to, our favorite spot to meet up was like at Burger King. And while he'll go home and get ready, change clothes and come back and we just go out and kick it.
How long did this relationship go on?
Ooh. The relationship went on strong for like about 2 years. And then I left and went to Mississippi.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Did your family ever find out about this affair with Miss Moffett?
Yes, they did.
What happened?
Oh, well, I was sitting at a restaurant with Miss Moffett, and a young dude went back to my house and told that I was sitting in a car at a restaurant with her. After then, we had words from then on,
So at that point, you were exposed.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you keep seeing Miss Moffett?
Yes.
So that lesson wasn't learned. Ms. Moffett,
Yes, Your Honor.
tell the court what happened when you found out you were pregnant.
I wasn't sure who was the father because I had went out to Maywood to see Mr. Johnson. And at that time, Mr. Johnson was at work, so I stayed around till he get off work so we could see each other. But in the meantime, I had went to one of my friend houses named Mr. Saunders, which I was dating before Mr. Johnson. Basically, I ended up having sex with him that day and Mr. Johnson at the same time. So that's why I'm not sure.
So wait a minute, you had sex with Mr. Saunders and Mr. Johnson on the same day?
Yep.
Not at the
Yes, Your
same
Honor.
time?
Yes, Your Honor, right, the same day.
And so when you found out you were pregnant, who did you tell?
Well, I told them both, exactly, because I wasn't sure who was the father. Once the baby was born, And as soon as Mr. Saunders seen her eyes, he like, oh, that's my baby. And I'm like saying to myself, I don't think so. But, you know, I led him to believe that it was.
But you believe Mr. Johnson was her biological father?
Yes, because Mr. Johnson and I had a connection, and pretty much Rissa was a love child. And I feel that Mr. Johnson was more of the father than Mr. Saunders was. And then as Rissa got older, she starts to get more features of Mr. Johnson. And then everybody, like in my family, like, oh, this is Mr. Johnson's child.
I didn't know she was pregnant.
You didn't?
No, Wasn't seeing each other that tough at that time, and all of a sudden, she came to me with a picture and showed me the picture of Rissa. And that's how I found out I might be the biological father.
So you gave him a picture?
Yes, Your Honor.
You brought it to him? You sent it to him? How did he get this picture?
I brought it to him. I showed him.
You brought it to him, and what did you say when you brought the picture?
I told him, I said, here's Rissa, and here's your child, you know, that you could be a possible father. And then also I did let him know about Mr. Saunders at the same time.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So you brought him this picture and said you could be the father.
Yes.
And there's also another potential father, Mr. Saunders. Is that what you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you remember her being honest about that?
Mm-hmm.
And
she
so
was.
then did you have doubt at that point?
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
once you started feeling like your family and everybody was saying it was Mr. Johnson's child, you love Mr. Johnson, you said, you know what, this I believe this is Mr. Johnson's child. You allowed them to form this father-daughter bond where you would let her visit him,
Yes,
spend
Your Honor.
time with him.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Ms. Moffett, Mr. Johnson was the only man you knew to be your father, right?
Yes.
You had no idea and had never been told about Mr. Saunders.
No.
So during Nerissa's childhood, were you told you were the only possible father?
No. Mr. Sanders?
Okay, Mr. Saunders. All right, you were told Mr. Saunders was her biological father?
Yeah.
So wait a
I
minute
didn't know.
now, this is confusing. Ms. Moffett, Mr. Saunders insisted, you said, you testified to that he was Nerissa's biological father.
Yes, Your Honor.
So that's what Mr. Johnson understood, that Mr. Saunders was her biological father?
Mr. Johnson didn't know that I was leading Mr. Saunders on, letting him know, Mr. Saunders, that he was the dad as well. He didn't know that I told Mr. Saunders that he was a dad also.
Okay, so why are you telling two men they're the biological father?
Because Mr. Saunders knew I had sex with him, you know, we had sex, and Mr. Johnson, and then at the same time that Rissa was conceived,
Okay.
that he kind of figured that Rissa was his, and he going by the color for her eyes because Rissa had the same eye color that his mom does.
But Nerissa testified that it was just 2 years ago that she was told that there was another possibility. So you knew this all this time,
Yes, Your Honor.
but you didn't tell your daughter.
No, Your Honor.
What I don't understand is you're telling two men they could be the father, but you're not telling your daughter that two men could possibly be the father.
I told her, that it could be a possibility, but
When did she tell you this, Miss Moffett?
2 years ago. But I just want to get this over with.
I know it's hard, honey. I know.
I don't know.
And the truth is, you weren't informed. Miss Moffett,
Yes, Your Honor.
why did you decide to just come clean now?
Because Nerissa needs to know who her biological father is and need closure so she won't be torn between two fathers, so she can have clarity and just go on. And they could build a bond because she has other siblings out there that she needs to meet. And, because they never did believe that Nerissa was his anyways. But
Your family never believed that Nerissa was your biological child?
Right, They don't believe it. I stayed out of it until Rissa got real sick. Went to the hospital and spent time with her. I said to myself, man, this child is laying up here fighting for her life, and she don't know who her father was. And she said she wanted her father there at the hospital. And I spent 3 nights there with her. I said, I'm gonna be there for her from now on out, bottom line.
And so how did you find out that Nerissa was sick and in the hospital?
Her stepdad And he told me, he said, Ron, you need to get to Indiana as soon as possible. We don't know if Rick's gonna be much around here much more longer. So I shot on over there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I shot on over there. And I seen all these tubes and stuff, and I just couldn't believe it.
And so at that moment, you decided to go to the hospital because you believe you were her father.
Right, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Saunders also come to the hospital, Ms. Moffett?
No, he didn't. And then when...
Did you let him know? Did you tell him?
Well, I didn't have any information for Mr. Saunders to let me know what's going on, but when Rissa came out of her coma, she gave me information and get contact with him because she wanted him to come and see her. But he made every excuse, the reason why he couldn't come. But if he claimed to be her daughter, it wouldn't matter. With no cost or whatever, he'd be out there trying to see her. If he thought that was her last days on this earth, he at least try to come out there and see how she was doing.
And this is the man that had been so persistent
Right.
that he was her biological father.
Yes, Sean.
And that he had even been persistent enough to send her these messages.
Yes, Sean.
And then when she's in a coma, he doesn't come?
No, Jan. Only one came is Mr. Johnson.
Sure did.
Narissa, I'm so happy you're okay.
Thank
I
you.
really am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you're all right. Can you tell the court what you feel?
I'm just hurt.
And you feel hurt because of this
Whole
paternity
situation.
secret?
The whole situation.
And it really is a lot to process because you're receiving new information in this very moment. I know that. Do you feel disappointed in your mom?
No,
What are you feeling?
just hurt. It's stressful to wait this long. And I'm 28. I should have figured this out when I was little.
Ms. Moffett, as you look at your daughter, how much of a toll this has taken on her emotionally, this
Yes.
secret?
Yes, Sean, I know it hurts, and I didn't mean for it to hurt her. I just didn't feel that, they pretty much wasn't even worthy because they never was there.
You feel like neither man truly showed the effort,
Yes, Sean.
so you just decided to let the secret lie.
Yes, Sean.
But did Mr. Saunders also know that Mr. Johnson was a possibility in terms of being Miss Moffett's biological father?
Yes, Sean.
Do you think both men just didn't show up because they were in doubt and they had no idea if they really were her biological father?
But, Your Honor, I don't think that would have mattered because if they saying they the father, they would be there.
You're saying because Mr. Saunders was professing that he was her biological
he should be the
father.
first one there.
Exactly. Exactly.
I need to ask respectfully, are they the only two possibilities?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
There are no other men out there that could say, I'm her biological father as well.
No, Your Honor. They're only two.
I believe I've heard enough testimony. I'm ready for the results. Jerome? These results were prepared by DNA Diagnostics, and they read as follows. In the case of Moffett versus Johnson, when it comes to 28-year-old Narissa Moffett, it has been determined by this court. Mr. Johnson, you are her father.
Yes,
Man, happy for you. Let me go now. You gotta let me go.
He doesn't have to let you go. I'm so happy for you both.
Thank you. She need me, but now it's time to do a lot more for her.
Amen to that. That's the beauty of the truth. It gives us second chances. It gives us another opportunity to do better. I love this picture.
Thank you.
I am a daddy's girl. I know that pose well. It is nothing better in the world. Nothing.
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep my eyelashes on.
I think mine came off.
Because you all ain't gonna get me today. But I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
You
Me
feel
too.
good?
I feel a lot better. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. I love you.
Take care of your little girl.
I will. I will.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
I wish you the very best of luck. Court is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.